Hey folks, this is Pecktec. Now it was about 9 months ago that I set this tank up, and that's awfully close to a year for as far as like a year-long update. Unfortunately, when I set this tank up, like right in the middle or towards the end of setting this tank up, my father passed away. And I have a feeling that when the 1 year mark comes along for this, I'm probably not going to feel like making this video. So we're doing a 9-month update, and I wanted to kind of tell you about all the systems that I've put in place here. This has a lot of technology built into this particular aquarium, and we're going to talk about all of those things and how they're working, and we're also going to go through some typical maintenance. I've got a little bit of work to do. Actually, I've already done it, but I've had a little bit of work to do on this tank, so I'm going to show you a little bit about how I maintain this aquarium and other aquariums, because a lot of what I do here is very similar to what I do for my other planted tanks. So let's take a look at that now. So of course, every maintenance starts with scraping the glass. It's real important that you pick something that's not going to scratch your glass. I like to use credit cards or business cards or kind of anything made of plastic. This seems like a really safe way to clean just about any kind of aquarium. I don't have any acrylic tanks. I would assume it would work on acrylic tanks, but I haven't tried that yet, so I'd hate to advise it because I know acrylic's a lot more sensitive, but it's never scratched a glass tank. And that's something that really bugs me is scratches on the glass. So I always start off with that. This particular tank also has some algae that's kind of built up in the buse. I don't have a lot of hair algae problems in this tank, but I will get little clumps here and there, so I just kind of go in there and I pull them out as delicately as I can. One trick that I've found is you can kind of anchor the plant with one finger and then use another 2 fingers to pull the algae out from between the leaves and disconnect it. That way you don't uproot your plants while you're trying to clean them. Another thing that I typically do when I'm going through my aquarium is I look for plants that are growing in ways I don't like, or that have outgrown the space. I've got a whole lot of Java fern that's it grows to an enormous size, probably because it's right over the CO2. And wow, Java fern and CO2 really react well together. Plus, I think this particular species has some really huge leaves. So I decided to pull out a huge chunk of that and then clean up some of the other leaves and stuff that are in there. Of course, I always go after dead leaves and things, or leaves that have like a lot of holes in them, and maybe they don't look as healthy, especially with the Anubias. I'll go in there. Sometimes, even if the leaf doesn't look too bad, I'll go ahead and trim it because it just makes room and it sends more energy to the other leaves that are doing okay, and it'll just spawn some more growth somewhere else. So something else I'll do sometimes is I'll take a toothbrush and I'll toothbrush on the rocks a little bit. A lot of times with the rocks I can flip them over, but if plants are attached to them and stuff and I can't just like flip them upside down from where they are now, then sometimes I'll take that toothbrush and go in there and just kind of knock as much algae as I can off there. I always think it's interesting too. I see a lot of activity from the shrimp, like it's something they couldn't get to that I've knocked loose in there. I'll see them all over the places where I've scrubbed, and I thought that was odd. I tend to get a little bit of hair algae on my branches and stuff too. What I do for that is I just take my fingers and I kind of work my way up the branch as if I'm as if I'm a creature that eats that algae, and I just kind of nibble it off of that branch as I work my way up there, and that's worked really well. It's not perfect. There's always some algae left over there, but I'm hoping that eventually it'll just get out-competed and maybe something else will eat it. One thing that I forgot to mention is I pulled up a lot of the 4-leaf clover that I initially planted through here. This got really full with 4-leaf clover, but it was starting to clog up and get full of algae all the time, and it was kind of a pain. So I pulled up 99% of it, and I've replanted little bits of it here and there. So it might come back. I'm hoping it comes back in a little bit more tame form. I obviously planted way too much. I gave most of it, I think, to Chattanooga Ed, and Tennessee Aqua got some of it too, but I did little care packages and I sent that stuff out. But it's nice and clean through here, which I thought was nice. I also added this rock, which wasn't in the original aquascape. I added that there to kind of make up for the fact that all that green stuff was gone and to fill in some space right there, but I like it now, and it looks a lot better. Up at the top too, I've got pothos kind of just coming out of the top, and it's a little dark in here, so it's hard to see, but it's doing really well. In fact, I've got pothos going in both tanks, just kind of spread around. It's a nice supplemental plant to stick out the top of your tanks. All right, so let's take a look underneath here and look at all the stuff down there. So here we are underneath the tank. We've got the Oase Thermo 350, the CO2. This is the original CO2 that I put in, and it is still not out of gas. As you can see, it's still got a little bit of gas in it. I'll probably have to refill it before too long, but so far it's still going. Also up on the wall here, you'll see the pump. It's actually not on right now because of the power's off with the water change and stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change this pre-filter out real quick. So I unlock it. This locks off the water and keeps it from coming down. I could pull this out if I want, but there's no need to at this point. I'll pull this like that. Be careful, sometimes when it releases, a little bit of water comes out. And if you pull out slowly, a lot of this stuff that's going to dribble out to the floor will kind of come out first. So now I'm going to take this over to the sink, and I'm going to drop the sponges out of here to be cleaned later and replace it with some new sponges. Alright, so I've dumped the sponges out of this part into the sink, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these and I'm going to rinse them out with some tap water, just like that. Get them nice and clean. Then I'm going to set, this isn't clean yet, but just to show you what I'm doing, I rinse them out like that until it's really clean, much cleaner than this. Then I set them aside and I let them dry. Now, because I'm not using these for biological, I can get away with using tap water to rinse these out. I've got all kinds of other biological things inside of the Thermo 350 to take care of that. This is just mechanical filtration, and because of that, I can just rinse these out in the sink. I'm going to take some that are pre-prepared, that have already been cleaned weeks ago, and I'm going to swap them out into here, put that back in the canister, and it's really that easy. It's like a little 3-minute chore every month or so, depending on how clogged, what kind of wood or whatever, what else you got in there, clogging your filters up. For me, usually it's driftwood. The type of driftwood that I have depends on how often I need to do this. But these do rinse fairly clean. I worked on this one a little bit already. They go fairly clean, and I just kind of get them to where they're mostly dry, and I just set them aside and let them evaporate out any of that chlorine or whatever that builds up in there. All right, let's put this back together. All right, here we are. And one odd one for some reason. I must have another black one running around in here. Oh, there it is. Okay. And the end of here. Back onto here. Lock. Test. Lock. Sometimes it might be a good idea to kind of prime it a little bit. These buttons don't work that great. This one doesn't seem to be too bad though. I'll give it a couple of pushes. Move some of the air bubbles through if I can. It does a pretty good job on its own. Let's power it all up. Yeah, I'll do this kind of for a few seconds. Kind of gets all the air bubbles out. I think sucks in a lot of air when you put the new sponges in there. There's air bubbles all throughout the sponges, so those things work themselves out. I usually just kind of close this off and forget it. And Yeah, it looks like it's just about done. But it's not unusual to hear a little bit of noise when you first do it, and then it's already quiet. You'll hear a few little wisps as it gets a little bit of the water out, but for the most part, it's done. Now I'm going to take those sponges and clean them out, then they'll go in this, and they'll be ready for next time. So use a Python water changer to pull the water out and add the water back. A lot of people ask me about gravel vacuuming your planted tanks. I tend to never gravel vac, like at least really hard. I'll kind of go in maybe a ½ inch or so sometimes at the surface and pull a little bit out. Sometimes you can tell when things are starting to build up in a particular area. That hasn't been a huge problem for me yet in this particular tank. But what I will do is I'll take that nozzle and I'll go hover over things where it feels like detritus is collected, over rocks and stuff like that. Sometimes when you trim plants, you'll underneath where that plant was, there'd be a lot of buildup of materials and stuff that you can clean up. And that's kind of what I did today. And when you're done with all that, check the temperature, I reverse the flow, and I add enough dechlorinator to dechlorinate the whole tank. So I add my dechlorinator as I'm putting the water in. There are a lot of people in the world, a lot of different places in the world where you can't do this. East Tennessee happens to have pretty decent water, at least my area does. I've tested it right from the tap. It does have chlorine, but the chlorine is almost instantly taken care of by the dechlorinators, at least I hope so. I've done experiments with this in the past, and it does seem to work. But I add a generous amount of dechlorinator along with the water. And I've been doing it this way for many, many years. It's more than a decade of changing my water this way. I tend to do about 20 to 40%. I don't tend to do much more than that. I don't think you should really do more than a 40% water change at a time, because I think a lot of times it's too much change for the environment that you've created in there. Opinions will vary widely on that particular issue, but that's just kind of the rule of thumb that I go with. If I know I've just done a water change on it last week or even 2 weeks ago, sometimes I'll go for about 20% of the water. Take 20% of that water out, 20% back in. Even at 20%, a lot of things you're doing a little bit of help, but you're not. Even if the temperature was way off, it probably wouldn't be a huge issue. If your dechlorinator somehow failed, it might not be a huge issue. So 20% is a really super safe amount. If you're doing a lot of water changes, I'd probably go to there. But you can't make up for it by like going 2 months without a water change and then do like 80%. You never want to do that. If you go a long, long time, then you're probably not going to want to change a huge amount of the water, at least at first, but you're going to have to do it more often. You know what I mean? So you might do 20%, then the next day do another 20%, and the next day another 20%, or something like that until you get the tank caught back up to like your normal standards. All right, so let's talk about some of the systems that are in play on this tank. So we've got the under gravel filter. I actually set up an anoxic filtration system for this. And by that I mean I've got the under gravel filter with a low flow, hopefully, through there. I'm not sure how I can really measure that, but I tried to set it up so it would be low flow. I did a cat litter cap on top of it, and that's the way it's set up. Now the rest of it's set up like I typically do my planted tank. That under gravel filter goes up actually to a surface skimmer. So it's like a surface skimmer. It's like a surface skimmer combo. It's meant to have like a regular intake at the bottom and then a surface skimmer on the top. But I ran the under gravel filter directly into that bottom part, and then so it's got the surface skimmer, and then it's pulling a little bit from down below. I was able to kind of take that tube and move it down, so that some of it's pulling from inside the tank over here, and then some of it's pulling from in the gravel filter, and hopefully that will result in a slow flow through the filter. At any rate, the best I can tell, that's all working out great. I haven't seen any issues with growing my plants and stuff like that too, so so far so good. In fact, one thing that's really odd that happened too is I was doing a water change, or sometimes during my water change, I forgot to turn the tank back on. So I've got a main switch in the back. It's just like a power strip that's got all the different pieces and parts of equipment connected. I flipped it off, and I did all my water changes, and I guess I turned everything else back on, but I forgot to flip that switch. And actually days went by. Days went by before I realized that nothing was going on there. See, this light is attached, it's tied in with the other Kessels in the room. So it's independent of everything on that power switch. So the light was coming on and off the way it normally does, but no filter, no heater, no CO2, no UV filter, no wave maker. It was all off. And it was all off for probably more than a week before I really realized it. I turned it all, I just flipped the switch back on, everything came on, and honestly, I saw no issues. Like, I didn't see a huge amount of algae, not much more than would already have been there anyway. The fish didn't seem troubled. I didn't lose any fish. The water temperature was a bit colder than it was, but our room temperature here isn't a death sentence for these guys. So it worked out pretty well. I got lucky. So know now that a lot of the systems that I have in place here, like at least the plants, are definitely doing their job. Plants with some light on them are still a great biological filter. Possibly, if I wanted to, I could turn off everything and just go with that. But I don't know. A week's one thing, permanently is a whole different thing. All right, so moving on, CO2. I've still got CO2. That tank has not run out. It's on every day, and it's going pretty good. It's like a bubble, every second or so, maybe a little bit faster. I had the CO2 come on a little bit before the lights, and then turn off a little bit before the lights. That way, it sort of saturates in there. The lights come on, it uses it all up, and then I cut it off in time for it to kind of work itself out. There's a lot of flow in this tank, so I'm not too worried about the water becoming oversaturated with CO2. But yeah, it's always a good idea to have it turn off a little bit before the lights, so it lets it work out a little bit. The wave maker in here has been really interesting. I've got it mounted right over the CO2, so it blows the CO2 bubbles around. It's the Slim Wave 1600, I believe, was the brand, and I really like it. It's been good. I think extra circulation in your tank really helps keep the algae at bay. I know most of the algae that I get are these little clogged areas where maybe water couldn't flow through as quickly. Now around back where it's super hard to film, I've got the Fluval UV filter. It's in line with the canister filter, so the canister goes through that and it goes out the overflow over here. I've got it set for 6 hours a day, and a UV filter is important for a lot of different things. It probably helps with the algae and stuff like that too, but what it also does is it can fight things like fish tuberculosis. In fact, I was listening to a podcast interview with Diana Wallstead, and she was talking about the combination of a surface skimmer and a UVB filter is a great way to beat fish tuberculosis or keep it at bay. It's something that's kind of prevalent in a lot of different aquariums all the time, and it could be a problem for humans for some people. So yeah, surface skimmer, the surface apparently is where a lot of that stuff tends to end up. So if you skim the surface, run that through a UV filter, it's going to help everybody inside of your tank. It's a great combo to do. The tank itself is beautiful, and it's held up really well. I love this low iron glass. It's really, really pretty. I've got a lot of fish in here. I think this is one of my more heavily populated aquariums, and it is really cool to see all the fish. In fact, most of the fish that I picked seem to be, for some reason, they just want to be right in front. I don't know if they're like, there's a flow around here and they like just being in the flow or whatever, but they're always just right here in front, and I love that. No hiding fish in here, and lots of beautiful colors too. I like it a lot. I was supposed to do wabi kusas this week, but that went really badly. I kind of had a huge fail. I picked some of the wrong materials to try to use, and it just didn't work. So I'm going to try that again this week, and we'll see how it goes. I need to say a big thank you to my Patreons, both in the past and the present, and say thank you for your support. I really appreciate your help. Here you are listed. I think this is going to be my last month with Patreon. I'm going to turn it off. There'll be a message for my Patreons. For all you folks, there'll be a message for you in Patreon in the next couple of days. I'm waiting to pull some stuff together. I've got a little Christmas surprise for you, and I'm pulling a few things together to get that going. That's all I got for you this week. Until next time, follow your bliss, keep a clean tank, and I'll see you soon. If you'd like to see the setup video for this, there's a playlist that shows you everything I did to make this aquarium. And right here is a video that YouTube thinks that you ought to like. I don't know why it thinks that, but it thinks you want to watch it. So maybe you should. Maybe you should check it out. Think about it.